Dot was 19. No degree, no inheritance, no rich uncle. He had a laptop, a Wi-Fi password, and a notepad full of ideas nobody asked for. And within 6 years of that moment, not overnight, not magically, he built a business worth over $1 million in cumulative revenue. Now, before you click away thinking this is another hustle porn fantasy, stop. Because what Dot did isn't the interesting part. Why he was able to do it, that's what we're here for. Here's the thing about being 19 that nobody wants to say out loud. You're broke, you're inexperienced, you're operating on 4 hours of sleep and a misplaced sense of confidence. But you also have something that most 35-year-olds have already traded away. Time, optionality, and zero sunk cost. You haven't locked yourself into a mortgage, a career path, or a lifestyle that requires a specific salary to sustain it. That's not a disadvantage. That's the most underrated asset in wealth building. But here's where most 19-year-olds blow it. They treat that asset like it's worthless. They spend it. They waste it. They mistake being busy for building something. Dot didn't do that. Let's talk about what actually separates people who build wealth from people who just talk about it. In 2019, a longitudinal study published by the National Bureau of Economic Research tracked over 2,700 entrepreneurs across a 10-year period. The finding wasn't what you'd expect. It wasn't raw intelligence. It wasn't starting capital. It wasn't even the idea. People who got real market feedback fast outcompeted everyone else. Not people with better plans, people who tested faster. Think about it like this. A video game gives you instant feedback. You jump on the wrong platform, you die, you restart. That's why people get good at games so fast. Most businesses give you almost no feedback for months, and most 19-year-olds have neither the patience nor the framework to survive that lag. Dot understood something most people his age don't. The business was never the point. The learning loop was the point. Now let's talk about the math that nobody wants to explain honestly. Most people hear compound interest and think savings accounts, 3% a year. Thrilling. That's not what we mean here. There are 4 things that compound in business and personal finance, and none of them are money at first. First, skills. Every skill you build has a multiplier effect on every skill you already have. A 19-year-old who learns copywriting, then sales, then product design, each one multiplies the last. That's not linear growth, that's geometric. Second, reputation. A study by Harvard Business Review found that professional reputation, particularly in niche communities, functions as a compounding asset. Your second client is easier to get than your first. Your 10th is exponentially easier than your second. The system works, but only if you're actually delivering value and not faking it. Third, systems. Dot didn't try to do everything manually. At 19, he built repeatable processes, templates, SOPs, simple automations that let him multiply output without multiplying hours. He was trading time for systems, not time for money. Fourth, capital allocation. And this is where most young people get it catastrophically wrong. They earn their first real money and they spend it on identity. New clothes, nice apartment, a car they definitely cannot afford. That's not wealth, that's a costume. Dot reinvested nearly everything he earned back into the system. Better tools, better skills, better people around him. For the first 2 years, his lifestyle barely changed. That's boring. That's also how it works. Here's the psychological trap that takes out more young entrepreneurs than any market downturn. It's called identity income conflation. You start to believe that your earnings are a reflection of your worth as a person. So when things are slow, and they will be slow, you panic, you make desperate decisions, you chase the wrong clients, you undersell, you overbuild. A 2021 study from Stanford's psychology department found that founders who separated their sense of self-worth from short-term financial performance showed significantly better decision-making under stress and had materially better long-term outcomes. Translation: the people who weren't emotionally destroyed by a bad month made better choices in the next one. What does that look like practically? You define your identity around systems and inputs, not outcomes and revenue. I am someone who ships consistently, not I am someone who makes X per month. That subtle reframe changes everything about how you behave when the numbers aren't where you want them. Let's be very clear about something before we go further. $1 million in cumulative revenue over several years of consistent, intelligent work is not impossible for a 19-year-old starting today. But there is no single path. There is no guaranteed route. Anyone selling you a guaranteed route is selling you fiction. What we can look at are the 3 most common structural pathways that have repeatedly produced that kind of outcome when combined with the psychological systems we just talked about. Pathway 1. Service business. High skill, low overhead. You sell expertise, marketing, development, design, operations consulting. The barrier to entry is only skill and positioning. Margins can be high. Scale is limited by your time, unless you build a team. This is the most accessible pathway for most 19-year-olds. Pathway 2. Digital products. You build something once. An audience buys it repeatedly. The challenge is distribution, getting people to find and trust the thing. This takes longer to build, but the math is structurally different. Lower active hours per dollar over time if it works. Pathway 3, media and audience. You build attention. You monetize that attention through sponsorship, affiliate, or product. The upside can be massive. The failure rate is high. The timeline is unpredictable. Most people underestimate how much consistent quality output it requires before anything converts. None of these is easy. All of them are learnable, and all of them require the compounding systems we talked about, or they stall. So, back to Dot. He didn't have a viral moment. No single product went parabolic. No investor wrote him a check. No algorithm magically discovered him overnight. What he had was a stack of systems he'd built and rebuilt over 6 years. A feedback loop he'd optimized quarter by quarter. A reputation he'd earned inside one specific niche with people who trusted him because he showed up consistently and delivered. He tracked his inputs, not his income. He reinvested before he rewarded himself. He separated his identity from the outcome. And somewhere in the middle of all that boring, unglamorous, unremarkable consistency, the numbers crossed a threshold he'd stopped obsessing over. That's the actual story. It's not heroic, it's not dramatic, it's not going to make a great movie, but it's the only version of this story that keeps happening the same way for people who build something real. Here's what I want you to sit with. Not, how do I make $1 million? That's the wrong question. That's an output question. The right question is, what system am I building today that compounds over the next 3 to 5 years? What skill is getting 1% better every week? What feedback loop am I actually paying attention to? What identity am I constructing? And is it based on inputs I control or outcomes I don't? Answer those. Build around those. Revisit those every quarter. The number will follow the system. It always does. But the system has to come first. If any part of this shifted something in how you think, not about money but about systems, hit the like button. That's your signal to the algorithm that this kind of content is worth keeping alive. Subscribe if you want more frameworks like this. Not motivation, not hype, actual mental models you can apply today. And leave a comment answering this. What's one system you're building right now that you believe will compound? I read every single one. That's not a bit. See you in the next one.